Who are you?
My son lives here.
This is a private estate. Get away from my gate! My son, Daniel. Don't ever mention my husband's name.
This is the story of a mother who waited, and a son who chose too late. That same morning, Ibadan. The sun hadn't fully risen yet when its light slipped through the mango trees behind the house, laying thin streaks across the red earth. Inside the small room, Mama Ruth knelt beside an old cloth bag, her trembling hands folding each worn piece of clothing with care. It wasn't that she owned nothing better. She had traded all the better things for medicine, for rice, for one more day of survival. She paused for a long moment over an old shirt. The fabric was faded, the collar soft from years of use, yet she smoothed it gently, the way one would stroke a child's hair. She pressed it to her chest and closed her eyes, as if breathing deeply might bring back her son's scent, the sweat of youth, the smell of sunlit days, the memory of a time when they were poor, but together. Outside, the last hen clucked hoarsely and circled her feet, familiar as an old habit. Mama Ruth looked at it, her gaze sinking. She knew selling it meant there would be nothing left, just in case hunger came. But she also knew that without the money, she wouldn't afford the bus fare, wouldn't to make it to the place she had been counting down to in her heart, Lagos. She stepped into the yard and called the usual buyer. The bargaining was quiet, but each word cut thinly into her chest. The hen was lifted, flapped once or twice, then went still. Mama Ruth accepted the crumpled bills, folded them carefully, and tucked them inside the lining of her blouse. Her face remained calm, but her hands were cold, as if they had just been pulled from a well. Next door, a woman leaned against her doorway and froze when she saw the cloth bag. "Mama, where are you going so early?" Mama Ruth turned back and forced a smile. The smile of an old woman carried something gentle and fragile, like paper brushed by wind. "To Lagos," she said lightly, as if talking about the weather. "It's been a long time since I've seen my son." The neighbor hesitated, her expression shifting from surprise to concern. Everyone knew Daniel had left Ibadan long ago. Everyone had heard he had made it, married into wealth, lived in a neighborhood so grand people only dared to look at it through their phone screens. "Mama, are you sure he knows you're coming?" Mama Ruth paused just for a beat. Only a heartbeat, but enough to feel a cold wind pass through her chest. She didn't answer. She only looked down at the cloth bag, as if inside it were a ticket, a promise, something that still allowed her to hope. She opened the bag and checked what she was carrying, things that might seem trivial to others, but to her were an entire lifetime. A few oranges from the tree behind her house, small but fragrant. She wanted Daniel to taste that old sweetness again, the flavor of poverty without shame, the warmth of childhood. The shirt Daniel used to wear, washed and kept for years, preserved like a fragment of time. She imagined him touching it, laughing softly. "You still kept this, Mama?" And maybe, just maybe, his eyes would soften. And a handwritten address, yellowed and blurred with age. She didn't know if it was still correct. She only knew it was the last thread pulling her forward. The neighbor looked at those items and suddenly felt a lump in her throat. Some pain needs no words. She thought of stopping her, then didn't. Who would dare kill the small hope of an old mother? Mama Ruth tied the bag tightly and slung it over her shoulder. She walked to the main road where an old bus waited. The engine sputtered, gray smoke rose, voices called out, vendors shouted. Mama Ruth climbed aboard and took a seat by the window, clutching the cloth bag like a sleeping child. The bus pulled away. Ibadan slowly faded, low rooftops, dusty roads, peeling walls. Mama Ruth stared through the glass. She didn't cry. She blinked slowly, like someone long used to swallowing sorrow whole. When the bus left the town behind, a cool breeze slipped through the window. Mama Ruth bent forward, pressing the bag to her chest. Her lips moved, her voice so soft only she could hear it, like a prayer afraid of disturbing the world. God, let him still remember me. Lucky, before Mama Ruth arrived. The afternoon drifted slowly through the upscale neighborhood, where everything was so spotless it left no trace of yesterday. Sunlight poured through wide glass windows, spilling onto the polished stone floors, reflecting a cold, distant glow. Amara stood before the mirror, adjusting the folds of her expensive dress, her lips curving into a smile that was just right, not for joy, but to prove she belonged here. Laughter floated in from the balcony. Amara stepped outside with a glass in her hand, her stride confident, as if she had been born on these streets. The conversation moved easily through familiar topics: travel, investments, private parties behind guarded gates. Then, casually, someone asked about Daniel. Amara smiled softly, lowering her voice just enough to make it feel like a secret being shared. My husband grew up poor. The words fell into the midday air, light as cotton yet sharp as a blade. Amara tilted her head, as though she were speaking of something distant, a memory framed and hung where no one would ever touch it. I worked hard to erase that part. She stressed the word erase, as if the past were a stain to be scrubbed away, a flaw to be corrected. Her friends nodded, a flicker of surprise passing through a few eyes, before quickly turning back into admiration for Amara, the woman who had risen on her own. Inside the house, Daniel leaned against the doorframe. He didn't step out. He didn't walk away either. He stood there in silence, like someone who had just heard his name spoken in a dream and was afraid to wake up. He remembered mornings in Ibadan red dirt clinging to his heels, the smell of thin porridge, his mother's voice calling from the yard. He remembered her frail hands mending his clothes before school, the way she smiled whenever he came home proud of some small achievement. Those memories weren't loud or glamorous, but they were him. Daniel stepped onto the balcony. Amara noticed him. The smile on her lips slowed, but it didn't disappear. I can't allow village people to show up here. The sentence was delivered gently, like an obvious rule. Amara didn't look at Daniel when she said it. She stared straight toward the horizon, where glass towers rose like promises of a different life, higher, farther away, and never looking back. Daniel swallowed. There were so many things he wanted to say. He wanted to explain that village wasn't a stain. He wanted to say that those backward people were the ones who raised him, who gave him the hands now holding this life. But the words lodged in his throat, heavy as stone. She's still my mother. His voice was low, as if speaking any louder would shatter everything. He didn't say it to argue. He said it to remind himself that a thread still existed, however thin. Amara turned around. This time, she looked directly at him. Her eyes weren't angry. They were calm, sharp, and final, the eyes of someone who had already decided long ago. Then choose. She stepped closer, close enough for Daniel to catch the familiar scent of her perfume, the scent of parties, contracts, and the future he had stepped into when he married her. Your past. Or our life. The sentence split cleanly in two, like two roads that would never meet. Amara wasn't threatening him. She was simply laying everything on the table neat, clear, leaving no room for ambiguity. In that moment, Daniel understood that to Amara, love wasn't about embracing all of who he was. It was about selection, keeping what was useful and discarding what was inconvenient. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked down at his hands that had once been caked with mud, once trembled with hunger, once held his mother's hand through rainy days. Then he looked up at the house, the iron gates, the life he was living, a life that required him to pretend he had never come from anywhere at all. Daniel didn't answer. Back to the present. The tall iron gate of the mansion in Lekki Phase 1 loomed like a wall between two worlds. At its peak, a security camera blinked a cold red dot, an unblinking eye with no mercy. Inside lay a spotless stone courtyard, manicured plants trimmed so perfectly that no trace of disorder was allowed to exist. Outside was a scorching, dusty sidewalk and an old woman trembling as she clutched a cloth bag like the last piece of her life. The guards rushed out, two large men in black uniforms. They didn't ask questions. They simply followed orders, a cold nod from Amara, a command delivered like a stamp sealing fate. Drag her out. Mama Ruth barely had time to steady herself before a hand clamped around her arm. Her skin was so thin that even the pull made her wince in pain. The cloth bag fell to the ground. Oranges rolled free, picking up red dust. Daniel's old shirt slipped into view, a pitiful reminder tossed onto the pavement. "Mama, please," her voice broke. "Please. Let me see him, just for a moment." Amara stood at the steps, her fitted dress immaculate, her hair glossy, her face beautiful and cold. She didn't come down. She didn't touch the woman. She only watched, the way one looks at trash blown to their doorstep. "Who let her in here?" Amara snapped. Then to the guards, flat and final, "Throw her out." Mama Ruth struggled like a dry branch fighting a storm. She reached toward the gate, toward the courtyard inside, believing that if Daniel appeared, everything could still be explained. Her voice tore through her sobs. "Daniel! Daniel!" The name ripped the air apart. Neighbors watering plants, walking dogs, stepping out to collect deliveries, all turned to look. Curiosity hardened into shock, then into disbelief. Mama Ruth saw them and lost what little dignity she had left. She forgot where she was. She was only a mother now. "It's your mother!" She cried, her voice raw. "Daniel, it's your mother!" Amara's lip twitched, as if she had just heard a filthy joke. She turned away, her voice sharp enough to cut skin. "Don't cause a scene." And then one hard yank sent Mama Ruth stumbling. She fell onto the concrete. The sound was short, dull, heavy. Her knees hit first, then her forehead scraped the edge of stone. She didn't scream. Only a sharp breath escaped her, as if even that had been stolen. Blood began to seep a thin red line, vivid against her wrinkled skin and the gray pavement. Mama Ruth touched her forehead and saw red on her fingertips. She froze, not from pain, but from shame. The shame of an old mother dragged like a beggar in front of her son's gate. The guards hauled her away as if she were something that didn't belong here. The gate slammed shut with a metallic clang clear final, as though every plea that had just been made had never existed. And then it started to rain. At first, just a few drops. But seconds later, the Lagos rain poured down as if the sky had been thrown wide open. Water splashed up from the road, icy cold. Mama Ruth sat in the rain, clutching her soaked cloth bag. The oranges lay scattered in puddles like dreams dropped and left behind. She looked up at the gate. It remained closed. No footsteps running out, no voice calling, "Mama!" No arms reaching to pull her inside. Only the sound of rain and her broken breathing. A neighbor, a middle-aged woman, couldn't bear it any longer. She ran over, held an umbrella above Mama Ruth's head, and knelt to support her shoulders. "Mama, Mama," she whispered, shaken and afraid. Are you sure this is your son's house?" The question cut like a knife. It wasn't cruel, but it struck the most fragile place, Mama Ruth's faith. Mama Ruth looked at her. Her eyes were red, whether from rain or tears. It was impossible to tell. She nodded, forcing the lump in her throat down. "He promised," she murmured, as if speaking more to herself than anyone else. "He would never forget me." Mama Ruth was taken to a public hospital as dusk settled in. The old ambulance screeched to a stop at the gate. Flickering neon lights washed over her frail body. Soaked from the rain, dried blood streaked across her forehead. Two nurses rushed the stretcher down a long corridor, where the sharp scent of disinfectant mixed with the damp smell of aging walls. Soft moans drifted from nearby rooms. Other people, other pain. All the same in one way. No one comes here when they are happy. The on-call doctor bent down to check her pulse. His expression tightened. He glanced at the nurse and spoke in a low but steady voice. She collapsed from shock. He paused, then flipped quickly through an old file the hospital already had records from earlier visits Mama Ruth had made alone, quietly, like a shadow. "And the cancer has spread." The words landed heavily, like a door being shut. No one in the room spoke. A young nurse turned away, pretending to adjust the four, as if she couldn't bear to look at the ending already written on the old woman's face. Mama Ruth stirred slightly. Her thin lashes fluttered, and then her eyes opened slowly, exhausted, yet still searching for something familiar. She didn't cry out in pain. She didn't ask where she was. The first thing she did was ask about her son. Did he come? Her voice was so weak it sounded like a breath, yet the question echoed clearly in the small room. A nurse froze. The doctor turned toward the window. No one answered. Mama Ruth blinked, once. Then again, she didn't cry. She only nodded gently, as if she had known the answer before she asked. Her hand slipped down onto the white sheet, her thin fingers curling slightly, like someone trying to hold on to an invisible thread. Elsewhere in the city, not far from the hospital, yet worlds apart, Daniel arrived home after the outdoor lights had come on. The iron gate opened smoothly, as if nothing unusual had happened that day. He loosened his tie and stepped into the living room, his mind still drifting among numbers and a meeting that had run too long. Amara was seated on the sofa, scrolling on her phone. She didn't look up when she spoke, her tone calm, as if recounting something trivial. A crazy old woman caused trouble today. Daniel stopped. A faint stab cut through his chest, though he didn't yet know why. I handled it, Amara continued with a shrug. Security took care of everything. Daniel turned toward her. A chill ran down his spine. He forced his voice to stay steady. An old woman? Amara looked up then. A flicker of surprise crossed her eyes at his sudden interest, before settling back into composure. She said she was your mother. The sentence was weightless, no emphasis, no emotion. As if she were repeating a lie told by a stranger. Daniel forgot to breathe. Every sound in the house seemed to fall away. The hum of the air conditioner, the traffic outside, even the pounding of his own heart. He stood there in the elegant room, beneath warm golden lights, yet his entire body felt frozen. Images flashed through his mind, the red dirt roads of Ibadan, frail hands mending his clothes, the voice calling Daniel every late afternoon. A thin, aging woman standing at an iron gate, calling his name, and he had not been there. Daniel stood motionless. Daniel ran to the gate. Only dried blood remained on the concrete, faded and smeared like something already erased from his life. The iron gate was shut tight. No one stood there anymore. Daniel dropped to his knees, not to beg for forgiveness, but because, for the first time, he understood. Some mistakes leave no one behind to forgive them. The wind swept through the empty street. The neighbors looked on, then turned away. She traveled miles to see her son, only to be beaten by the woman who married him. Sometimes, the worst pain doesn't come from strangers. It comes from family, who don't know who you are,